South Jersey's home of the Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
I am the voice of the voiceless.
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here, Game Night, 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live on Facebook, YouTube. It's where you can watch the show, hang out with me here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We're live in the Matt Black Kia Studios. And, of course, you guys will get involved in the show. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Get on the conversation. Plus, if you want to jump on the stream, jump in the chat on the stream. People do that all the time. If you follow 97.3 ESPN, you can watch the show. Joining us coming up at 6:20 to get into the huge Flyers trade, which I didn't believe was real at first, honestly, is Scott Laughlin, SiriusXM NHL radio, friend of the show. He'll give us a national perspective on what do people nationally think of the Flyers now? Like, they make this trade, this huge deal. Do the Flyers get more attention now? Do people think there's more coming? Chuck Fletcher inferred there's more coming, as you heard from Kevin Durso earlier on 97.3 ESPN, our Flyers insider. So we're going to get a national perspective on that deal. Plus, I'm going to get it to Bucks up 3-2 in the finals. Game 6 tomorrow night. You can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. That coverage begins at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Also, Phillies' huge winning weekend, and we are just days, not weeks, days away from the Eagles reporting to training camp and to get the season started. Can you say can't wait enough times? Football is almost back. I know a lot of people were excited over the weekend about the fact that we're that close to Eagles season being back. But before we get to anything else, I got to start with the Phillies, because this Phillies team has just come out of nowhere and found a way to get all of our attention. Another winning weekend, another series that they won. And frankly, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that this team is where they are. And I'm just looking around thinking, I can't believe it. I can't believe that this team is winning this much. And it's not because I don't think they can't win. It's because of the fact that I look at this team and I say, they have these flaws and these holes and these things about them that are just not 100% right. But they're still finding ways to win. And when Bob Wankel said this to Mike Gill earlier today, that the Phillies have the best record at 10-4 in the month of July, that tells you, it emphasizes what I've been trying to say to all of you right here each week here on 97.3 ESPN, that this Phillies team can be contenders. This Phillies team is not out of it. And look at the Mets. No DeGrom, no Lindor. They're falling apart at the seams. And the Phillies are charging. And if they play their cards right, they will win the division. This is not a what-if scenario. This is I'm promising you, if they do things right, they will win the division. Because number one, the Braves, who are currently 2 games behind the Phillies, are without their best player. No Ronald Acuna for the rest of the year. That is a huge, huge, huge loss for Atlanta. The Nationals, they have so many questions. They have more question marks than the Phillies do. And they're right now 4 games behind the Phillies. The Phillies are just 2 games behind the Mets. They're 2 games over 500. The Mets at 48-42, Phillies at 47-45. And as I told you guys before, if the Phillies didn't have 22 blown saves, maybe they're the team that is going out there and leading the division right now, which only makes it even more important that you have to get some help with the bullpen. You have to do it. And I understand it's sexy that people have all these rumors about Starling Marte and Byron Buxton. But you can get all the center fielders you want, or any center fielder you want. It's not going to make up for the fact that your bullpen is very untrustworthy right now. How are you going to trust? How are you going to believe in this team if they don't at least do something to improve the bullpen? If Dave Dombrowski is to be believed, he said on the John Clark podcast that this team is not giving up their big prospects like Abel and Stott. Well, if you're not giving up Abel and Stott, it limits your shopping options at the deadline. It limits your possible avenues to improve this team. So if your man in charge is not going to go all in to the middle of the table with all of his chips and get the best player humanly possible, then you know what? Maybe we have to limit our thinking as well. I'm just saying, a lot of people want the Phillies, and myself included, want them to go make some big moves. But this team doesn't seem to be 100% there. So you might have to look for the next tier down move. So maybe Buxton and Marte are not in the cards per se. Or maybe Marte is in the cards because he's a free agent after this year. Maybe they only acquire guys who are going to be free agents. Like a Rodriguez from the Pirates. I mentioned Marte. It's one of those deals where we have to be realistic. The more realistic we are, the more we're willing to accept what's going to happen. And I don't think you're going to get the best pitchers. You're not going to get a Reyes from the Cardinals. Maybe you get an Ian Kennedy from the Rangers. Maybe you get a guy like Rogers from the Twins. Maybe you have to go a little smaller than the biggest names possible, and that'll be the guys to upgrade this team. And remember, when the Phillies won the 2008 World Series, it was, and even 2000, you look at 2007, 2008, 2009, they didn't go out there and make the massive trades every time. It was guys like Joe Blanton and Scott Air and bringing in Pedro Martinez off the scrap heap. There's a guy in Cole Hamels who, if he looked anything good last week when everybody went to his pitching session, maybe that's the guy to fill the rotation out the back end of the season. Maybe it's a guy, like I said, Ian Kennedy, who gives some stability to the bullpen. I'm not saying we can't think big, but be ready to be a little let down. Because if you're let down a little bit, it hurts a little less. So I'm hoping they do something. I believe they will do something, but I don't know what that something will be yet. And I have a feeling more and more that it's not going to be the big fish. It's going to be that next tier down. But even that next tier down can be productive for you. Josh Hennig here, Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can join the show, comment as you watch on the stream. If you're listening on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app, the text board is open, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation, 609-403-0973. We'll be joined by SiriusXM NHL radio host Scott Laughlin coming up in less than 10 minutes from now. And the part of the reason why Scott's coming on the show is because the Flyers did a pretty good job at trying to steal the headlines this weekend. They made this massive deal that was basically at the deadline, they NHL said that all the teams had to lock transactions, a transaction freeze, starting at 3 p.m. on Saturday. And they got this big deal in right before the deadline. The deal that says we are moving on from Nolan Patrick. And we're going to have to give up a guy like Myers to get a more veteran, experienced guy to pair up next to Ivan Provorov like Ryan Ellis. And this is a move that really shocked a lot of people because it's been a long time since the Flyers really had a big move to talk about. In the last few years, it's been a lot of smaller moves. It's been a lot of muted moves. It's been a lot of things that don't really get anybody excited. Now you got a guy in Ryan Ellis who is basically the third best defenseman you could have had available out there right now. I know a lot of people are looking at guys like Dougie Hamilton and Seth Jones, but realistically, guys like Hamilton is just going to cost way too much money. And there's speculation, as Kevin Durso told Mike Gill earlier today, there is strong speculation that a guy like Seth Jones wouldn't have made sense because he doesn't want to be here long term. Take a listen.
The Seth Jones one is interesting because they definitely were involved with Columbus and trying to work out a deal there as well. But if Seth Jones wasn't going to commit beyond this season, I think the last thing Chuck Fletcher wanted was another Matt Niskanen situation where you get the solution for one season and then you're back looking for something else, or to have to negotiate that deal. What they know is you get 6 years with Ryan Ellis. It's at $6.25 million a year, and you can factor that in moving forward. So now you can address the other areas, knowing what you owe the top pairing defenseman that you have for the long-term future.
Think about it this way. You can still actually get Seth Jones. You could still get him on that 1-year deal kind of thing. So you could go big, but you got to hope that you can unload one of these big contracts. There's a lot of speculation because the Flyers left both Voracek and JVR unprotected, that it will be an opportunity to either create a trade situation with Seattle that would unload one of those contracts, or a situation where Seattle picks a guy for you in the expansion draft and then they flip him to you in order to take a player or two or some other asset off your hands. And there's a lot of speculation out there. The Flyers could trade the 13th overall pick. So it seems like that Chuck Fletcher is not sitting on his hands. And if Chuck Fletcher can come out of this offseason, getting rid of Voracek's contract, bringing in a guy like Ellis, maybe bringing in one more defenseman, whether it's Seth Jones or somebody else, maybe going out there and get a guy like Tarasenko who is on his way out the door in St. Louis, and you change up the roster like that, now you're going from a team that feels very underwhelming to a team that's very exciting. And I know some people out there are saying, well, why would I care about Ryan Ellis? Because he had the fewest goals he's had in a season since he was 22 years old. But you got to also remember, he only played 35 games last year. The NHL measuring stats off of last year, I think, is unfair. These guys played a limited number of games. Remember, the entire season, they only played, 52 games in the regular season. And they only played it within their division. They didn't play anybody else. Their level of competition was completely out of whack. That's half the reason why Montreal ended up in the Stanley Cup final. In any other world, Montreal doesn't get to the Stanley Cup final this year. But because of this whole bizarro COVID situation with the border and with you could only play within your division and you only saw a different team get to the conference finals, it was such a disaster the way it was set up. Like, it was great that we had hockey. Like, it's great that we had the NBA. But at least the NBA that saw, something that resembled what we saw in the regular season in the past. The NHL didn't give you that. So don't get hung up, in my opinion, on Ryan Ellis's numbers because you didn't get a regular season last year that was normal. Now, if you're a little uncomfortable with the injury history that Ellis has, the fact that before last year, Ellis only played in 70 games, 3 out of 5 seasons. All right, I can work with you there. If that's your concern about Ellis, that he has an injury history, all right, I can work with that concern. But outside of that concern, I think this is a win-win for the Flyers. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do this offseason because the Flyers right now are trying to steal headlines. They are legitimately trying to improve this team in a big, big way. And I'm excited for it. All right, we're going to get more into that coming up next. National perspective on the Flyers. How big was the deal the Flyers got? What could we expect from the expansion draft on Wednesday night? Scott Laughlin, SiriusXM NHL Radio, joins us. Coming up next, right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show, comment, join the conversation. Phillies winning weekend. Eagles training camp a week away. Flyers trying to steal headlines this weekend. Sixers off season in progress. Whatever's on your mind. NBA Finals, Bucks lead 3-2. Text Sports open 609-403-0973 and comment on the stream as we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night.
The NBA Finals continue.
15 seconds left to Giannis for the flush.
Giannis and the Bucks keep rolling, winning their third straight to take the 3-2 series lead. Now we return to Milwaukee, where the Suns face a must-win Game 6. Will they survive, or will the Bucks be crowned NBA champions? Game 6 of the Suns and Bucks. Coverage begins tomorrow at 8 Eastern on ESPN Radio.
The NBA Finals, exclusively on 97.3 ESPN FM. South Jersey's sports leader.
On some models excludes Corvette with GM financing, excludes prior sales. See dealer for details.
By now, most people know that nobody beats a Bennett Chevrolet deal. Because when you buy a new Chevy from Bennett, you pay the same as any GM supplier employee pays. That's right, not 1 cent more. Plus, Bennett gives you all the rebates that can add up to 25% off MSRP. That's up to 25% off. And of course, Bennett Chevy has 0% financing available. Think about all the ways you save at Bennett Chevrolet. Plus, right now, we want your trade. So we're paying a minimum $7,000 for any clunker. You heard right. A minimum $7,000 towards any pre-owned in stock. Nobody pays more than Bennett. You can imagine how much more we'll pay for a good trade. And there's more. You'll never feel any sales pressure and never waste time with stressful negotiating because our non-commissioned sales staff is paid on your satisfaction, not how much you spend. Nobody beats Bennett Chevrolet, and we mean nobody. Find new roads at Bennett Chevy at Hubbard Township and BennettChevy.com.
Hey, sports bettors, it's Mike Gill, and I wanted to share with you how I've been cashing in on the PropSwap sports bets resale app. On average, sellers on PropSwap have been making $500 a month. It's easy. Just post all your betting tickets for sale on PropSwap and let them find you a buyer. Listing your ticket is always free, and if it sells, great. But if not, the bet is still yours to keep. If you're not selling sports bets on PropSwap, you're missing out on incredible side hustle. Start making extra money today by downloading the PropSwap app and selling your sports bets.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig back here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Unexpectedly, the Flyers tried to steal the headlines of the weekend with a 3-team deal. And to get more into that, plus the NHL expansion draft, which will spend a lot of dominoes for the rest of the NHL offseason. He's a friend of the show. He is SiriusXM NHL radio host Scott Laughlin, and he joins us right now on 97.3 ESPN. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. Just fired up about the week that will be for the National Hockey League. It is going to be a business, and it's going to be business that's going rather briskly, I think we should say here in the next couple of days. There'll be a lot going on, a lot of comings and goings, that's for sure.
So I want to start with a big picture question for you. You know, in our area, for example, like when I saw the trade come down on Saturday afternoon, I'm at the gym, I'm in between sets, I looked down, I thought my phone was, punking me or something. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't expect the Flyers to make this deal. So what has been the reaction for you guys who watch the entire league and around the league about this deal?
Well, I tell you what, Josh, I think it makes sense for all the three teams that jumped into it. I think Nashville got younger. They've still got hopes for Myers. I know he kind of took a step back this season in Philadelphia, but they think that not only do they get younger, but potentially better down the road on the back end. I think they were able to flip Patrick, of course, for Cody Glass. They've got some high hopes for Glass, the guy that was selected 4 picks after the Flyers selected Patrick to begin with. Patrick gets a new lease on life. It seems like things had kind of run their course there, as you guys know, when it comes to Philadelphia with Nolan Patrick. Last season, stayed a little bit healthier, no doubt, but maybe the production wasn't there like they expected from the second overall pick. So he gets a new lease on life with an organization in Vegas that needs some help down the middle, and maybe he can grow into a nice role with the Vegas Golden Knights. As for the Flyers, what they get is they get a veteran guy who's well-respected in the room, a guy that can play some major minutes in all different types of situations, a guy that you could probably plug in with Ivan Provorov. We talked about missing Niskanen and what that meant to Provorov, and he didn't necessarily have the season this past season that he had before that, and maybe he took a step back himself. So I think not only do you add a veteran guy here, albeit it is a pretty big ticket here for the next 5 or 6 years or so on Ryan Ellis, but you've got a well-respected veteran guy that can play some minutes and really plug into that top pairing, I think, ultimately, with Ivan Provorov. So I think from a number of different standpoints, it works for all the teams that were involved.
That's one of the things that Chuck Fletcher mentioned in his press conference, Scott, which is the fact that this is a guy who's locked in for next basically 5-6 years with the Flyers. And for them, that stability was important. I got to wonder for the Flyers, is this maybe something, Scott, where they said, look, we don't know if we can afford Dougie Hamilton. Is Seth Jones going to sign an actual long-term extension? And that Ellis was the best option for them long-term.
No, I think that's bang on, Josh. And I mean, look, let's make no mistake about it. Their first priority was going to be Seth Jones, right? And when word came out that Seth Jones wasn't willing to extend with Philadelphia, just like he hasn't been willing to extend with Columbus, well, then obviously you're not going to make that deal. The only team that would really jump in and make that deal was a team that was maybe one player away from winning a Stanley Cup and a Norris Trophy caliber type defenseman in Seth Jones. Other than that, you want him to sign and extend and make sure that he's going to be there for years to come. He wasn't willing to do that for Philadelphia. I'm not sure who he's willing to do it for. Perhaps it's Chicago now because his brother Caleb was traded there from Edmonton last week. Maybe it's Denver because his dad, Popeye, who, of course, Sixers fans know all about now, too, was also a guy that was out there in Denver, played for the Nuggets and such, too. So there's the tie-in with the Denver area. But again, they've got to free up some cap space, certainly, to take care of that if they're ever going to orchestrate a deal to bring Seth Jones to town, especially with Landeskog, a free agent right now. Nathan McKinnon on that cap-friendly deal is going to be coming up here in the next year or so, where they can extend him, and he'll probably pretty much double his AAV. So I don't know. I mean, it just seemed like Seth Jones was more than willing to just kind of let this season play out with the Jackets. He might not be moved after all. He might just let it play out. The Jackets might find out that they can't get much back for him, because if he's hell-bent on testing the market coming up next summer, that just might be where it's at. So to answer your question, yeah, I think this was a good plan B for the Philadelphia Flyers, and I think this is a trade that Flyers fans are really going to embrace as the seasons go on.
What do you say to the people who look at Ellis and say, look, this guy, he's only played 70 games or more, what is it, for the last 6 years? He's getting older. He's had some injury issues. What do you say to those people?
Well, he's not that big too, Josh, right? I mean, he's an undersized defenseman too. I think he's proved a lot of skeptics wrong. Now, this is a kid that came out of Windsor. He had Memorial Cup success in winning with the Spitfires years ago for Warren Reichel and Bob Bugner and DJ Smith and all those guys in Windsor. He had a pedigree coming out of junior hockey. He was a guy that was an offensive catalyst. He could quarterback a power play like nobody else in junior hockey at that time. I wondered, because he was so undersized when he came into the NHL, just exactly how he would somehow win those battles in front of the net with the bigger, stronger, oncoming forwards. He's been smart about it. He uses great positioning and body position to win those battles more often than not. And I think that maybe his size has been something that has allowed him to have a chip on his shoulder, and he's kind of proved the point that he can play in all different types of situations. As for the injuries, yeah, let's make no mistake about it. I mean, that's a concern. The numbers are what they are, and he's missed some time. I think they would have done their due diligence as to where he's at physically, and they think that he's still going to be the guy that gets back to where he was a couple of years ago, too. So, look, I mean, staying healthy is a skill. I do a show with Mike Johnson each and every day on NHL Network Radio, and Mike played in the league for over 10 years, and he says it's a skill, and I believe him. There's some luck involved in staying healthy, no question about that. Sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and freak injuries can occur, but I think staying healthy is a skill. It's a skill that he had for the most part in his career. Last couple of years, not so much. I think he can get back there.
Scott Laughlin, SiriusXM NHL Radio, joining us right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at LaughlinSXM, talking about the Flyers' big trade and, of course, the NHL expansion draft. Scott, there's a lot of big names that are being exposed in this draft. And, I mean, is Seattle really going to take the bait on all of these guys? Or is this some posturing going on to try to make further moves for some of these teams?
I think they're going to take the bait on a couple of these guys. They are not going to take the bait on a lot of them. I think that there are some, including Voracek and Van Riemsdyk, I think, that maybe are a little bit older than they want, a little bit more highly priced than they want to take on at this point. That being said, they are going to take on some big tickets. I could see them picking up Tarasenko. And whether they trade him immediately or whether or not they trade him at the deadline, that remains to be seen. But I could see them biting on Tarasenko. I could see them also, believe it or not, taking a swing at Carey Price. I know he's heading for New York, and in the next couple of days, he's supposed to be meeting with a specialist to find out exactly the extent of his knee injury, whether or not he's going to have to undergo surgery. I just think that would be a great starting point for Ron Francis. I think that Carey Price could turn out to be what Marc-Andre Fleury was for the Vegas Golden Knights. He would instantly become the face of the franchise. When he gets healthy, if in fact he has to go under the knife, and you could LTIR him to get that salary cap space in the meantime, I think he instantly gives you credibility. I think he makes you competitive. He's one of the top goalies in the league. He didn't have a great regular season. He was outstanding in the playoffs, of course, as the Canadiens got to the Stanley Cup final. So I think he can, even going to the age of 38 and making $10.5 million per, which is a big ticket. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here, Josh. I still think he'd be worth it, because we've seen guys like Marc-Andre Fleury and Mike Smith and Pekka Rinne and guys playing into their late 30s who are still effective. These guys are special breeds. This guy's going to the Hall of Fame for a reason, and I think CP31 could really help the Seattle team get off the ground. You could establish that culture from day one. I know he's going to be 34 here coming up soon, but I really do think it's worth taking a swing at Carey Price to start your franchise that way. He's from the Pacific Northwest. He could get back out there closer to family and friends. His wife is from 3 hours outside the Seattle area as well, so it makes a whole lot of sense. And I know Mark Bergevin is basically throwing it out there saying, I don't think you're going to take him. I think Ron Francis should and could take that bluff that Montreal has thrown out and take advantage of it fully. Seattle's talked about being a cap team, Josh, right off the hop. If you're going to be a cap team, you're not going to select 30 guys who have 2-year contracts that make $1.5 million per season.
Right.
There are going to have to be a few guys come on board that are big ticket items, and I think Carey Price is going to be one of them.
Now, with that being said, also you mentioned Ron Francis, but the head coach is former Flyers coach Dave Haxtell. Do you think Dave Haxtell is in Francis' ear when he sees some of the guys the Flyers have exposed, telling him, listen, man, if you're going to pick anybody, pick fill-in-the-blank guy? Is there maybe a little influence going on there?
Yeah, there could be. And, I've looked at the protected list and the unprotected for the Flyers. And as I said before, on the surface, obviously, with the pedigree of Van Riemsdyk, the pedigree of a Voracek, the Flyers would like to drop some contracts here, obviously. And if they could get Seattle to bite on one of those guys, I don't think they'd be all that upset about it, to be quite honest with you. But I could see maybe a guy like a Justin Braun perhaps being an unheralded pickup for Seattle, perhaps on the back end as a depth guy that's been around the block a few times that could really help out, I think, with some of their defensemen. So I would look at a guy like Braun who's not going to break the bank. He's a veteran, another well-respected guy in the room that maybe you take a swing at. So that's the type of guy probably at this point I could see Philadelphia losing.
Now, you mentioned Tarasenko earlier. I've read and heard rumors, and you can expand upon this a little bit and maybe clear it up, that there's a possibility that the Seattle takes Tarasenko and then they grab him and hold him for somebody else. Now, we know the league is in this transaction freeze, so how exactly would that work if that does happen?
Well, they would select him coming up on Wednesday night. Seattle can trade with anybody at any time. The league-wide freeze will come off on the 22nd, so the day after the expansion draft itself. But Seattle's sort of driving the ship here. They can make trades anytime they want to with any team out there. It's just that other teams have to sort of batten down the hatches here up until the 22nd before they can jump back in with all the other teams. So there has been that report out there. It wouldn't surprise me if they grab Tarasenko and he's not there for very long. Maybe they flip him because they've already had apparently some interest on Tarasenko. Seattle has, if in fact they go through and claim Tarasenko. Look, Tarasenko, 2 years, $7.5 million per, still left on his contract. The big question certainly is the shoulder. He's had 3 shoulder surgeries in the past 28 months, and there lies the issue between he and the organization. He felt like the organization didn't handle the injuries very well in terms of the surgeries and what they recommended. The trust is no longer there between Tarasenko and the medical staff in St. Louis. I think once you get to a point like that, Josh, and the Flyers have had a couple of situations over the years that have popped up like that, certainly, and I remember Dave Babbage years and years ago with what happened there. Once you get to that point and that bond of trust is broken, I think that there's no turning back. So there's no doubt Tarasenko's as good as gone, whether it's St. Louis trading him or whether it's Seattle claiming him, keeping him, and or trading him as well, also remains an option. But if he's healthy, clearly, he could be the type of guy that could really help somebody. If the shoulders sound, I think he could be that guy. He scored 40 once. He scored 30 plus 4 different times. If he can get any of that back, certainly he'd be a great asset for Ron Francis.
Scott Laughlin, SiriusXM NHL Radio, joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at Laughlin SXM on Twitter. Scott, bring it back to the Flyers because you mentioned them. I want to ask you, Chuck Fletcher has been saying again and again that they're not done making moves over the weekend, that they're open to trading the 13th overall pick, and he's made it very clear that they're not done making moves. So, if you hear a GM say stuff like that, what does that say to you over the years of watching the NHL as you have?
Well, if you're open to moving that 13th pick, that tells me that they're in a bit of a retool, not necessarily a rebuild. Far from it. They feel like they've still got some veteran pieces. And again, I know the captain's going into the final year of his contract, and beyond this, we're not quite sure about Claude Giroux. We know Voracek's got a couple years left at a rather big ticket himself and a big number. JVR, again, I'd be surprised if Seattle bites on JVR's contract as well. So I think he realizes that he's got some deals here on the books. And they've got some young guys that have clearly stepped up, like the Scott Laughtons of the world, certainly Joel Farabee, players like that they can build around here for years to come. And Morgan Frost, of course, at least right now, is still with the organization unless they decide to make something a little bit more monumental happen with that young prospect also. So I think right now they've got a combination of veterans and some youth sprinkled in. And Chuck Fletcher's made the decision that they're going to retool. And they're certainly far from a rebuild as far as he's concerned. The goaltending, obviously, each and every time we talk, Josh, we talk about the consistency that up until this point has kind of eluded Carter Hart. This is a huge offseason for him once again. It'll be important for him to come to training camp in the right frame of mind, to be healthy, to be productive, to get that confidence back that the young goaltender, of course, has at times lost here in the last year or two. So whoever his running mate is, sounds like Brian Elliott's probably as good as gone, that they might look elsewhere and maybe Elliott moves on to his next stop in what has been a real good career, but he's kind of bounced around between team to team. I think regardless of what they go with, there's so much, once again, stop me if you've heard this before, Josh, but on the shoulders of Carter Hart once they get to training camp in September.
Absolutely. And you got to think that they're going to keep addressing the defenseman position because of what happened last year. So that's why it seems like to me more and more that, listen, if the Flyers are willing to make trades, they're willing to make moves, and they're putting these guys on the list of the way they are, it seems to me, Scott, that this is a team with a GM that's coming to the poker table, to use the analogy, and saying, hey, listen, I ain't telling you what's on my hand, but I'm willing to push chips to the middle of the table if I have to.
Well, let's not forget, too, when you think about it, too, Josh, Chuck Fletcher's got a past history with Ryan Suter. Now, Ryan Suter's a hot commodity. I think he was totally blindsided by the fact that with, 4 years left on that lucrative contract that he signed so many years ago in Minnesota, that he was let go. He was bought out. Zach Parise, we weren't necessarily surprised about. Parise said afterwards, it's been the lowest point of my career this past season. I think he kind of expected to be released and to be let go, to be bought out. I think everybody was shocked that 36-year-old defenseman Ryan Suter was one of the guys that was bought out. Again, there are plenty of suitors. Boston comes to mind as a team that maybe Ryan Suter could hook up with. Certainly there are probably half the teams that would use a Ryan Suter and still value him at this later stage of his career. I think Philadelphia could be one of those as well. He'd be a great fit, and that familiarity going back to Minnesota with Chuck Fletcher perhaps would serve Philadelphia well if they can free up the funds somehow, some way to bring him in on a contract. Because as I said, with so many teams involved in the bidding process here, it's going to be about fit, but it's also going to be about money and term and what's available to Ryan Suter.
Now, with all that being said, we know that just days after the expansion draft is the NHL draft. How much movement are you expecting to see happen from that Thursday, 1 p.m. through the draft weekend for the NHL?
Yeah, I think business will be really, really good in terms of transactions that are going to be made right after Seattle has their roster picked. Because then, again, the dust settles. You see who Ron Francis has selected. Now you can start to go back at him once the trade freeze comes off. In fact, you don't even have to wait for the trade freeze to come off. If you're Seattle, you can initiate trade talks with anybody, as I mentioned earlier to Josh, at any time. But I would expect there would be movement before the draft on Friday night. The draft itself is going to be totally bizarre. It's going to be surreal from the standpoint that other than the first rounders, and we've got a pretty good idea as to who's going to go top 10 first rounders to boot, the scouts just haven't seen these players because of the pandemic. The Ontario Hockey League did not have a season. The Quebec Major Junior Hockey League pieced together some sort of a season, didn't hand out a championship trophy at the end of it. The Western Hockey League had a truncated 24-game schedule that they played in, and unless you were a top-flight player from Ontario and you were affiliated with an Ontario Hockey League team, you didn't even get a chance to play this past season due to the pandemic. So the top guys got to play in the U20s and the U18s, but the guys that were sort of those middling third, fourth-round draft picks that we're going to hear their names called on Saturday, they didn't even get a chance to show their wares, and the scouts didn't get a chance to see them. So Ron Francis, whom we've been talking about a lot here in the last couple of minutes, Ron came out and said, you might find this draft to be totally different to the point that you might have a fourth-round pick that turns out to be just as good as a first-rounder because it's a crapshoot. It really is, because the scouts have not seen these kids play.
Even more drama to add to the NHL offseason. I know you guys will be talking all about it. SiriusXM NHL Radio. He is Scott Laughlin. Catch him in the mornings on SiriusXM NHL Radio. He joined us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at Laughlin SXM on Twitter. Scott, great insights. Always appreciate the conversation.
Anytime, Josh. Thank you.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. A lot of great stuff there from Scott. We're going to hear from you guys coming up next. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. And, of course, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter with your comments there as well. Right here, I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night.
The NBA Finals continue.
15 seconds left to Giannis for the flush.
Giannis and the Bucks keep rolling, winning their third straight to take the 3-2 series lead. Now we return to Milwaukee, where the Suns face a must-win Game 6. Will they survive, or will the Bucks be crowned NBA champions? Game 6 of the Suns and Bucks. Coverage begins tomorrow at 8 Eastern on ESPN Radio.
The NBA Finals, exclusively on 97.3 ESPN FM. South Jersey's sports leader.
No matter the mileage, no matter the make, no matter what you owe, Medlet Kia wants your vehicle today. Even if you don't want to buy a new car from us, we need to replenish our inventory, so we need your vehicle, no matter the situation. Stuck in a loan or lease? Medlet Kia wants to get you released. Get cash for your car today, up to 125% of Kelley Blue Book fair market value, even if you don't buy a car from us. However, if you are looking for a new ride, take advantage of New Jersey Charge Up Incentive Program. Get $10,000 off on all brand new 2020 Niro EV, all 2021 Kia Souls, $1,500 cash back, or pay 0 interest for 60 months on every Kia Sportage, Forte, and Stinger.
It's gotta be a Matt Black Kia.
Offers with approved Tier 1 or 2 credit through Kia Motors Finance. Not all will qualify. 0% based on 1667 per 1,000 borrowed. Negative equity financed into new loan. Call 877-289-6670 or go to mattblackkianj.com for complete details. Expires 8/6/2021. Matt Black Kia, 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, and now on Route 37 in Toms River.
Why would someone looking for a mortgage at the Jersey Shore take a loan from a company in Detroit or North Carolina or some other far-off place? Online mortgages promise a lot but don't always deliver. First Bank of Sea Isle City knows the Jersey Shore. We are local lenders. We use local appraisers and provide in-house processing. We understand the unique obstacles of financing in Cape May County. Don't take a chance. Local banking is better. Let us guide you. First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig back here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can join the conversation. We have James and Jeff over there on YouTube channel. Get to your guys' comments as well as the text board. A couple texts came in, 609-403-0973. Before we get to all of that, don't forget my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA Finals potentially only have one more game left, hopefully two, but they have one more game left, and you still have a chance to not miss out on the great offer for new users during the NBA Finals. Get 30-1 odds on either team to win their next game. That's right. If you think the Milwaukee Bucks are going to win Game 6, or you're willing to ride with the Phoenix Suns, you get 30-1 odds on either team to win Game 6. That means you can win $150 on a $5 bet. There are so many ways to win with FanDuel Sportsbook during the NBA Finals on their simple-to-use app with unique fun bet types and exclusive always-on promotions. So new users, sign up with promo code Hennig and bet the NBA Finals with 30-1 odds. Once again, that's promo code Hennig to unlock 30-1 odds on either team to win their next game. Exclusively on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Must be 21 or older, play and present in New Jersey. New users only. Must wager in designated offer market. $10 first deposit required. $150 max bonus. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And listen, if you would have jumped in on the same game parlay we had, you could have taken advantage of the same game parlay insurance with FanDuel Sportsbook. So what happens is when the one leg didn't hit, we hit all the legs except for one. You got your money back up to $10. It's like credit. Now, if you would have not taken the Suns on the money line, you just would have bet the rest. You would have been fine. 5-2 on the picks over the weekend. Not too bad. But you only could do the same game parlays with FanDuel Sportsbook. Again, at least one more game left to the NBA Finals. Hopefully two. I would like to see the series go 7 games. I'm with Jeff Bowen and Pookie. I'm still hoping for a Game 7, Jeff says. I'm still hoping too. But it's starting to look bleak because it seems like the Suns don't have an answer for the Chris Paul conundrum. He's the best ball handler in this series, and the Suns keep losing the turnover battle. And it's a combination of pressure defense. It's a combination of Chris Paul just doesn't look like himself. It seems like this NBA Finals is going to come down to, can the Suns find themselves before the Bucks close the door in their face? Because you're going back on to Milwaukee. I just saw the announcement from the Bucks Twitter. They're going to have potentially 65,000 people outside the arena in the Deer Park. What the? Are you kidding me? You're going to tell me that Giannis doesn't want to win this one for Milwaukee? The city drafted him. They took care of him. He re-signed there. Man, it's starting to look bleak for the Suns. It really does. Those Buck chants of Bucks and 6 starting to look like a real reality right now. Before we get to more messages on the YouTube channel, I promise we'll get to you guys on the text board, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Text chimes in and says, I just read the Twins are asking for a haul for Barrios. I would really like to see the Phillies get Paul Fry. He's not a rental either. We need a lefty on. A couple things there. One, I don't think the Phillies were ever in on Barrios. From everything I've read and heard, guys like John Heyman and Ken Rosenthal, the idea is the Twins, if they are going to offer and maybe be willing to trade Byron Buxton, that the Phillies would be interested in that player. So Barrios has never been the guy that the Phillies were interested in. But the problem with, if they want a haul for Barrios, probably going to want a haul for Buxton too. And I'm just wondering, is Dombrowski, if he has the opportunity to get Buxton, is he willing to go the next step? And if you believe Dombrowski from the John Clark podcast, he's not willing to go all in. He's not doing what Chuck Fletcher's doing right now. Chuck Fletcher is prepared to push all the chips to the middle of the poker table. Meanwhile, Dave Dombrowski does not seem to be willing to do that. He does not feel that this is the time to do that. So, if you believe him, I don't know if Barrios or Buxton are coming to Philadelphia. Now, Paul Fry is interesting because Fry has not had a great year, but he's had a solid year. Okay. I know he's under club control until either 2024 or 2025. So if you acquire a guy like him, he's under control for another few years. So you have that going for you. He's not a rental. You're right. But again, the problem with him is that I don't know if he is the best option. He's kind of like a depth guy. I love the strikeout to inning ratio, the 45 strikeouts to 34 and a third ratio. I don't like the 3.93 ERA. I don't like the fact that this guy tends to give up runs sometimes. Okay. He's allowed 15 runs in 34 and a third innings. So he's almost allowed about a run in 45% of his innings at this point. So I'm not thrilled with that, but I'm willing, if that's a guy you can get, I'm cool with that, because if you're going to buy in that next tier down level, as I said, that tier of not the best pitcher, but the next guy down, the next tier down, he definitely falls in that category. As does the next guy that James Gatling says. Now, Gatling mentions one guy that I don't know if he's attainable or not, but the other guy is. James Gatling says the Phillies are going to get Starling Marte and Ian Kennedy, book it. So, a couple things there. One, I definitely think Ian Kennedy is a possibility because he's on the Rangers right now, and the Rangers aren't going anywhere. The Rangers are going to sell a lot of their players very shortly. And Kennedy has been a closer 2 of the last 3 years in Major League Baseball. He has 15 saves this year for the Rangers. 2 years ago, he had 30 for the Kansas City Royals. So he's a competent, solid closer. He's not great. He's not one of the best closers in baseball, but he's solid. He's competent. He's a get the job done kind of guy. He has 32 strikeouts in 30 innings this year. 2 years ago, he had 73 strikeouts in 63 innings with the Royals when he had 30 saves. So I like the strikeout to inning ratio. ERA is solid. 2.67 this year. 2 years ago, 3.41. He's a veteran pitcher, a little older. It's not going to cost you a lot to get him. So if you're the Phillies and you walk out of the trade deadline with Ian Kennedy and Paul Fry, I'm good with that. I don't think that's a bad situation. By the way, if you walk out of there with both of those guys, then at least you have two guys who you didn't have to give up a lot to get them. So I like those ideas. I'm not sold on the idea of Marte yet, because as I said, if Dombrowski is not willing to go all in, chips to the middle of the table, I don't know if you can get Marte on the cheap. I know Marte is going to be a free agent. I definitely understand that. But at 32 years old, Marte is not washed up. You know, the guy has a 285 batting average this season. So when I look at Marte, I'm thinking about a guy who still has a good enough bat to be productive. He's got a good enough on-base percentage, an okay slug. He's a solid, good player. And I don't know if the Marlins are going to sell him cheap or not. He only has 2 errors on the entire year, so he's definitely going to be, in theory, an upgrade over Odubel Herrera if you place him in center field. I like Marte. I think he would look good in the Phillies uniform. I just question, how much is Marte going to cost from the Marlins? Because on one hand, he's a free agent to be, he's a rental, so I don't expect you have to give up a ton to get him. But if you're the Marlins, what exactly are you asking for from the Phillies? You know, what does Dave Dombrowski think about his organization right now? You know, if you're the Marlins, what do you really want from the Phillies? That's not Bryson Stott or Nick Abel or any of those young prospects. You know, are the Marlins willing to take, I don't know, Mickey Moniak and Scott Kingery off your hands? I doubt it. At least I certainly wouldn't. I don't know exactly what the Marlins' plans are moving forward. They're a strange organization right now because they're run by Derek Jeter. They have a whole new front office than they had the last few years. We know the Marlins are infamous for recycling guys left and right. Garrett Cooper just got put on the DL. The Marlins are clearly the worst team in the division. And Marte is one of the handful of players who are legitimately tradable for them right now. So if you're the Marlins, how much do you ask from the Phillies to make it worth your time? Is there someone who is worth their time to ask for in the Phillies organization that isn't one of the bigger names? So I like James's idea, Marte and Ian Kennedy. I like Ian Kennedy. I think it's doable. I'm not sure about Marte yet. I got to find out what exactly it's going to take for the Phillies to get a guy like that. All right, thanks again to everybody who chimed into the show. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks to Scott Laughlin from SiriusXM NHL Radio. I'll be back tomorrow at 6 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Don't forget 97.3ESPN.com and 97.3 ESPN mobile app.
Health Update with Robin Stoloff. Learn more, live better.
It's time to get your grill on. What's summer without a cookout? If you're hosting the get-together, you want to make sure you do it right.